I don't want any pseudo-humility here. How many of y'all would classify yourselves as somewhat close to being a Logos power user? Two of you. How many of you would like to be a Logos power user? A lot. Everybody would like to be a Logos power user. And there's Pastor Perkins. All right. He's a power user. So, okay, how many of y'all have been to a Logos camp with Morris Proctor? Okay, how many of you have been to more than one Logos camp with Morris Proctor? Good. Well, how many of you have been to one with Morris Proctor on Logos 6? What?
That's where I come in.
Yeah, and I've been through one through both the Camp 1 and Camp 2 on Logos 6. So anyhow, what I want to do today and tomorrow, here's how the schedule is going to run during the lunchtime. We call this a brown bag lunch, so you can grab you a lunch somewhere, go to Aunt Pookie's, go down the street somewhere, swim through the intersections, grab your burger or something, come back and set up, and we will work on some skills in Logos. What typically happens is what typically happens. Hey, Ray. What typically happens is that now I wanted to introduce two people here to you. Anthony,
Yep.
Right? And what's your last name, Anthony?
Ortiz.
Anthony's here. He's a Logos rep, and they're going to offer a 50% discount, right?
We're offering a 20% conference-only discount.
Okay.
Today through Friday evening.
Yeah, right. So that's a great deal. Is that covering anything? Resources, collections, anything. So that's a great deal. We do this every year, and he's going to give a demo in the morning. So if you're not sure about Logos or you're relatively new, I compare it this way: that a lot of guys have Logos. Logos is the most powerful, I think, biblical research tool available, and it's like a Rolls Royce. But I find that a lot of pastors get to where they can use it to kind of do what they do, and they stop. They don't figure out how you can do a lot more stuff. And even when I go to Camp 1 or Camp 2, or I talk to John Brummett, all of a sudden he's doing stuff that, man, I never realized I could do that. And it so improves what you're doing, makes it so much more efficient. And you can do things you never thought you could do in terms of Bible study. That what we find out is a lot of pastors have a Rolls Royce sitting in their garage, but they're going out there and they're getting on a tricycle, and they don't want to exploit the tremendous potential they have in Logos Bible software. So what we're trying to do is just sort of up your game a little bit. And if I don't see anybody here who can do this for me, but I will get a sign-up sheet for y'all. And one of the things that Logos does is they've got something called Faith Life. How many of y'all are familiar with Faith Life? Okay, one, two, or three of you. One of the things you can do on Faith Life is you can create private groups. So we have a Dean Bible Ministries pastor group. And one of the ways in which this works is, let's say I create a visual filter, and this is something I've done, and it's out there on the page, and it's a visual filter that identifies... Who are you looking for, Ann? Ann, I'm talking to you. Who are you looking for? Barb. Ann's looking for you, Barb. It's called The Power of the Pulpit, Ann. Okay. What I do is I create a visual filter that I'll show you in just a minute. That Barb, Ann's out here looking for you. Okay, pastors have to do everything. Okay. What it does is we created a series of color codes years and years ago. A pastor friend of mine, he wasn't pastor then, he didn't know Greek, I didn't know Greek, but as we were listening to Bible classes, the pastor would say, well, this is a present active indicative or a perfect passive subjunctive or whatever. And one of the things we did, we'd color code all the verbs. So all the present tense verbs were yellow, and all the aorist tense verbs were red, and all of the future tense were green, things like that. So we color coded, and we had all these little symbols we'd put in there, and we'd color code everything. Well, I created a visual filter that color codes the whole New Testament. And what's great about that is no matter how well you know Greek, you don't spot things, you spot color code. You can look at a paragraph that fills a whole page, and you see 20 yellow verbs, and in the middle of them's a red verb. And you go, why is that red verb there? So it's really a neat thing to do. So I take that visual filter, I post it I share it to that website, and then anybody who's a member of that group can download that. Now, once you've downloaded it, it's shareable. Let's say I go in and I change something, then that automatically uploads and revises. So we can do this with passage lists. We can do this with notes. For example, Art Booz, who works with Morse Proctor, has taken all the transcripts of everything that I've taught, and he's put that into one long note file. And you can download that note file, and that becomes a shareable document. Every time Art updates it, then that automatically gets updated on your laptop. So if you go to Genesis 1:1, you see the transcript for the lesson I taught on Genesis 1:1. And so when we get a bunch of guys together and we're sharing things, like John Brummett has he's going to talk about this tomorrow, a whole bunch of passage lists he's created. For example, one's a passage list that has all the passages in the New Testament in the Bible related to the millennial kingdom. And the way he did that was that he went to some things like Ryrie's Basic Theology and several other things that had chapters or sections in theologies on the millennial kingdom, and then you highlight that chapter, and then you can import just the verses from that chapter into a passage list. And then the next time you want to update that, you go to another resource. You go to something like Chafer Systematic Theology or some other book, and you add passages there, and it cleans itself up. And it puts everything in biblical order, and it doesn't duplicate. It cancels out duplication of verses. So this is a great tool. Every time anybody in the group adds to that Millennium Passage group or passage list, then it automatically updates. So this way, everybody benefits from each other's kind of work, and it's a nice cooperative venture. And those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. But in order to become a member of this pastor study group, I need to have your email address so you can be sent an email to invite you to that group. So we'll send along a little sign-up sheet so that you can do that. All right. One of the things that I want to talk about, first of all, because I put this up on the screen, is a new feature that Logos has called Logos Now, and Anthony, if you or John, if I cover anything and you want to add to it, just raise your hand, and we'll go to you as well. If you and you might help if you wanted to show something, come up here. But Logos has this new system called Logos Now, and it's Anthony's back here. John Brummett, raise your hand, John. John's pastor of Grace Bible Church, Free Grace Bible Church in Richardson, Texas. And he's got some great things he does with Logos, and he'll be covering things tomorrow during this lunch break as well. So we're going to be just honing in on, just a few more power user type things that you can come to understand. Well, anyway, here's the page you go to. It's logos.com/now. Okay, is that a backslash? I can never remember. What's a backslash? What's a front slash? That's a forward slash. Okay. I can't even see it from here. Okay. Yeah, I can't see that from here. My eyes aren't that good. /now. And that takes you to the Logos Now page. You sign up for that, and you automatically get billed, $8.95 a month. And what they're doing is they're generating new features, new tools, new reports that automatically go into your Logos. Every month there's new things that come out. And if you go to this page, they have some little videos that show you how to use it. So this is a concordance feature that's now will show up under your tools menu. Now, most of you think you know what a concordance is. A concordance is a list of words that you find in your Bible. Well, you can generate biblical concordances from any version you have in your Bible. If you're interested in studying the Message, I hope not, then you're at the wrong conference. No, if you're interested in studying any, you can pull that Bible in, and it will give you a word list of every word that's in that Bible and word frequency, and then you can click on that root word, and it'll give you a list of all the cognates for it and everything. But it goes further than that. You can do that with the Hebrew text. You can do that with the Greek text. Let's say you want to find out what words Louis Berry Chafer talked about, what Greek words he had in his systematic theology. So you can go to Louis Berry Chafer's systematic theology. You can create a concordance, which doesn't take long, 2 or 3 minutes. It generates a complete concordance of all the Greek words that Louis Berry Chafer talked about in systematic theology. So if you were studying, let's say, I want to see what he has to say about dikaiosune for righteousness, and you can generate the concordance will generate a Greek list of all the Greek words Chafer uses, and you can click on dikaiosune and go see what Chafer said about dikaiosune in Chafer's systematic theology. And you can do some other things. You can do it with commentaries. You can do it with any book that you have in your library. You can create a concordance of that particular book. So that allows you to do a lot of different kinds of searches for data that you may not be aware of. Then you have another item here, Old Testament propositional outlines. I have not looked at that one yet, but that's another one of the data sets that they've got out. Then you have a media browser tool that allows you to look at all of the media that is in Logos. You've got some videos in Logos, you've got images in Logos, charts, things like that, and you can search all of those different images and find things. And if you use PowerPoint or Keynote, if you're really in the kingdom, then this will help you in terms of your presentations. Bruce?
Does this media browser search your library, or does it search Logos, or can you make it, everything, in the Logos store, or can you make it do either?
John?
I think it does both. I think there's a lot of additional information out there on the web that it pulls from.
Okay, it can also pull from a lot of stuff on the web.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will
search your library.
Wait a minute. It can search your library. What we're looking at is a media browser. It can search your library. It can search the web. And what else?
And it pulls from the cloud that Logos has.
Oh, it pulls from the cloud because Logos has a lot of older books that are not in Logos, and it'll also search those that are up on the cloud in Logos. So that pulls nothing. Rick?
Search your transcripts. Will it search your transcripts?
The media browser won't because there's no media in my transcripts.
No, I'm talking about the concordance.
The concordance. I don't know. Will it search your note file? Can the concordance search your note file?
I have to look at that. I have to get back to you on that one. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. They've got a couple of more things that are coming out. In fact, I've been trying to update to the beta, John, since I crashed it the other day when I was talking to you. It took me 10 minutes to reload it, so that was no problem. And once I talked to a Logos guy to work me through it, but John's got some stuff that he's got in his beta version that I haven't been able to get into my beta version, but that's what's coming out. A beta version is for people who are willing to risk their computer to run, test beta versions of Logos. So anyway, that's a cool thing to be aware of, and I encourage you to keep updated. That when you learn about these, and the trouble is that some of this stuff's so new, there's no real video instruction out there, which is kind of what I wanted John and me to talk about, or John and I to talk about, or John wanted John and me to talk about. Okay, here we are. Here's Logos Bible Software, and I wanted to just talk about a particular word. Now, I'm going to be teaching on Romans 10, 9, and 10 tomorrow night, so I thought, we'll just go to Romans 10, 9 and use that as a test case. And Romans 10, 9, and 10, if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. So let's say we're looking at a word, at a phrase like this, and we want to talk about the meaning of the word righteousness. Okay, so you want to search on the word righteousness. You want to start doing a word study. and we want to, we'll do a right mouse click on the word righteousness, and you may not know Greek or Hebrew. You don't have to necessarily, maybe you do know Greek or Hebrew. Whether you do or not, you don't need to know Greek or Hebrew to search Greek or Hebrew. You do a right mouse click, and it gives you all kinds of options in this. I never remember. Anthony, what's this pane called? I never remember.
I can't see.
When I do a right mouse click on a word, it opens up this pane.
Should be the information pane.
Information pane.
Typically will be on the right-hand side, but
Right.
that way you have
So
to
you can look on the word righteousness in English up here, or you can go down here where it has the Greek word dikaiosune, which is the lemma. It's always got this little circle next to it, which is based on their little visual graphic they do on the various nuances of a word. So let's say we want to look at just the word dikaiosune. We may want to look that up in various lexica. So here I have a list of, I wouldn't talk about how we get these into this window, but these are the various top 5 lexica that I look to when I'm doing a word study. But one of the tools is Lonida. Now, I've been a little suspicious of Lonida basically because I'm suspicious of Eugene Nida. And if those of you who don't know who Eugene Nida is, how many of y'all know what dynamic equivalent translations are? Okay, some of you don't. When you translate from one language to another, there's basically 2 different ways you can do a translation. You can give a very rigid, strict, literal, word-for-word translation, or you can give a more idiomatic, looser translation. For example, if you know anything about, but not everything will translate over from the original language into the target language, simply because there may not be something comparable in the target language. For example, if you're German and you are meeting someone and you want to ask them how they're doing, you would normally say, "Wie geht es Ihnen?" Ihnen is a formal word for you, for second person singular. In German also has a familiar form, du. And in some places in Germany, the language has become more informal, and so you would say, "Wie geht's du?" If you're in Switzerland, you would probably only use the informal second person singular to someone who's in your family or a very close friend. So if you're talking to somebody and you are saying, how are you doing, you may translate word for word. It would be, how are things going? Because gehen is the verb there, and it means to go. So literal translation would be, how are things going with you, sir, if it's the formal. If it's informal, you might say, how are you doing? See, that's looser. It's become idiomatic. Or you might just say, how's it hanging? So that's how you might translate things into a more, or what's the haps, brother? You know, you get it more informal and more idiomatic. So Eugene Nida is sort of the father of the dynamic equivalents, like what I refer to as the New International Commentary. The NIV really isn't a translation. It's more of a commentary, and it reflects the theological biases of the translator. For example, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 3, in the Greek you have the words sarkinos and sarkikos, which the root meaning is flesh, and I think that refers to the sin nature. But in the NIV, they're translated as world, but world is usually a translation of cosmos, not flesh. So there you get a real insight into the sanctification model of the translator in the NIV. He has given you a commentary. He hasn't translated the text, in my opinion. So that's dynamic equivalence, and the Message is one of the more extreme, the Living translation. These are more the extreme dynamic equivalents, and Eugene Nida is the father of dynamic equivalent translations, and that's not a good thing in my opinion. So I've always been suspicious, but what we have here with the Lonida is a tool that does help us understand something called semantic domains. Semantic domains, any word has a range of meanings. Some words have only one or two meanings. Other words have several different meanings. So let's say that you are working in a particular passage or something, and you come upon a word you want to investigate. And I've got one I'm going to open right here. Here's the Oxford English Dictionary. And see, the last thing I looked at was word. If you look up the word word, in the beginning was the word. Well, what does the word word mean? Well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, there are 6 different nuances to the noun word. And then we have the verb word, which has 2 basic nuances. So you have to decide when you're looking at a passage which meaning does John intend in that particular passage. Now, when you look at different words, their meanings may be very, very different from each other. For example, if you were to look at the English word trunk, and if you just saw the English word trunk, you might think that, well, that's talking about the back end of a car, what the British refer to as a boot, and that where you store things. That's the trunk of a car. But then you have another meaning that refers to the main stem of a plant or a tree, the trunk of a tree. Well, the trunk of a tree is a very different concept from the trunk of a car. Then a third meaning might be a large storage locker that may be transportable. And I remember my mother had one of these from back when she was in college that never got opened in their house until after they were dead. So you may have the same kind of experience. So you have 3 different meanings for the word trunk, don't you? Well, if you're talking about trunk as a storage locker that's transportable, then when you look that word up and the synonyms for that word, they're going to be a different group of synonyms than if you look the word trunk in terms of this main stem of a tree. Those are 2 completely different nuances, and you're going to have one set of synonyms for the first one and another set of synonyms for the second one. So this is what in the Low-Nida dictionary, this is what they've done, is that they have isolated these words into different semantic domains. So one semantic domain for the word trunk would be that related to a storage locker, a suitcase, luggage, baggage, those kinds of words. And then another semantic domain would be the stem of a tree. So you might have trunk or stem or something like that. That would be that semantic domain. So when you're working with the text of Scripture, then you're going to want to look at what those domains are. So if we went back here to the New King James, and let's just look up, go back to John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. If I select Word and go down to Low-Nida, that's 33,100. Okay, there we go. Click on that. And that opens this up. Let me see if I can enlarge it a little bit so we're not straining our eyes too much. Okay, that takes us to 33,100. Now, if you look at the way Low-Nida is organized, they took all the words that are in the Bible and they lumped them into 93 categories. And each one of those categories has subcategories. So if we go to 33, this is called communication. So you have all the words that are used in the Bible are summarized under these. So you have communication under subcategory language, subcategory with the nuance of word or passage, subcategory discourse types, subcategory language levels, and then down here F is to speak. So if we look at that, and then there's more under that going all the way down to D prime. So that's about 30 or 31 different subcategories just to communication. And what you may find is that any given English word is going to be maybe in the dictionary more than one time. For example, in 33:100, which is what we're looking at, you have logos, meaning a title for Jesus in the Gospel of John as a reference to the content of God's revelation as a verbal echo of the use of the verbs meaning to speak in Genesis 1 and in many utterances of the prophets. Okay, that's one meaning, but under 33 communication, 3399 lists logos with the sense of the act of speaking, speaking or speech. So any given Greek word may be listed a number of different times depending on the semantic domain. Is everybody confused? Is anybody confused? Okay, glad you're following along. So this is one of the things that's very, very helpful when we're going through biblical study. Now, what I always say, whenever you look at any lexica, whether it's Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich, Danker, or I guess it's Bauer, Danker, Arndt, Gingrich now, or whether it's Kittle, especially Kittle, or Colin Brown's New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology and Exegesis, or whatever it might be, you always need to make sure you can confirm the meaning of those words by looking at how the word is used. A dictionary only doesn't tell you what a word means from an objective, absolute position. A dictionary is the product of a lexicographer who's doing the same thing that we're doing. He's looking at a variety of uses and he's summarizing what the meaning of that word may be by looking at that field of meaning. But there are a lot of mistakes. I find mistakes or things that I disagree with very strongly. For example, in Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich, which is ultimately one of the most obvious, is their word glossa, which is the word translated tongues. And they list three meanings in the lexicon. Now, if you're a Bible student and you want to know the meaning of the word, for the Greek word behind the translation tongues, then you're pretty much concerned about the whole issue of the spiritual gift of languages. Okay, so you're trying to understand how glossa is used in 1 Corinthians 13 and 14 and in Acts chapter 2, primarily in the New Testament, maybe Acts 8 and Acts chapter 11, 10 and 11. So if you look at this and you're looking at the word glossa, you say, okay, I want to know what this word means. So you go to, well, let's just do this and I'll show it to you. You go to 1 Corinthians 13, 8, and you look at tongues. Okay, and you go down, you find out, okay, this is the Greek word glossa here. I'm going to look this up in Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich. And it says that the first meaning is to refer to an organ of speech. That's that thing that lies behind your teeth. Okay, it's the physical organ of your tongue. So glossa is used in most passages. Whenever you look at a dictionary, they rank meaning according to predominance of usage. So the first meaning is the most common meaning, second meaning is the second most common, third, the third most common, etc. The second meaning that they give for glossa is a body of words and systems that make up a distinctive language. And so tongue, in referring to language by the word tongue, that's really an archaic English term, and it just refers to a language, an organized system of communication in various different languages. But then they have a third category, that an utterance outside the normal patterns of intelligible speech and therefore requiring special interpretation, that is, ecstatic language, ecstatic speech. So they offer this as a third, but their biblical support for this is 1 Corinthians 14, 1 Corinthians 12, 10, 20, and 30, 1 Corinthians 13, Acts 10, Acts 19. They don't list Acts 2, interestingly enough. So you have these passages. Well, those are the passages where you're trying to find the meaning. And what they've done is created, this is a logical fallacy. They've determined the meaning from looking at a passage they've already determined the meaning for. Okay, you don't use the dubious, questionable issue passage as a foundation for your category. There's no meaning of ecstatic utterance listed. If you look at the if you look at the list there, they have one or two listed there, but they're not. They can all be challenged. If you ever interested in studying this, read an article in Bibliotheca Sacra Dallas Seminary's Journal by Wayne House on on tongues and the mystery religions in the ancient world. And I did a word study on this probably about 30 years ago, going through, long before we had computers, going through all the uses of the word glossa and in mystery in mystery literature, and it never refers to the ecstatic utterance of, for example, the Oracle of Delphi or any of the false religions. It's never used as a synonym for ecstatic utterance in non-biblical literature. So you can't say this is a meaning in biblical literature by using biblical literature to support your contention. The dubious passages, that's a linguistic fallacy. So anyhow, just because the dictionary says it might mean X doesn't mean it does. You have to be able to do your own homework and check their data to make sure they have properly used their evidence. So that's one of the things. So when we look at these passages and we want to go to Lonida, we'll go back to Romans 10, 9, and 10, and we look at the word righteousness. We're going to come down and we're going to go to the Lonida number. Click there, and it's going to take us to 8813, which is a subcategory of moral and ethical qualities. And their second category is just and righteous. And under that, they list a number of synonyms, words that are used that somewhat cover this area of a positive quality. And it's 8813, dikaiosune, which describes the act of doing what God requires. And then it may list one or two other passages. So Lonida is good for that. You can then do a right mouse click on dikaiosune, on the Greek word, and now what you're going to do is you want to select that word on the right-hand side of the window, and you're going to go over and you want to search the Lonida dictionary for all of the uses of dikaiosune. Now, let me say something about the way this Lonida dictionary is structured. The first volume lists those 93 semantic categories and all their subcategories. Then the second volume is like a regular Greek lexicon. It lists all your Greek words from alpha to omega. And so you go down and you find where dikaiosune word group is listed here, and you select that, and it gives you 4 meanings for dikaiosune, 4 semantic range categories. The one we were looking at, because it's related to Romans 10, 9, and 10, is the idea of righteousness. That was 8813. But in other contexts, it has the idea of to be put right with something. That would be Lonida 3446, and if you put your cursor over it, you get a little tip window where you can look at that real quick without going to it. Religious observances in 53.4 and charity in 57.11. So that's one way you can look at these particular things. That's using Lonida. Now, another thing that you can do, John, you're going to touch on the Bible sense. Were you going to do that tomorrow? Or if I don't, you can expand on what I say. I'll kind of introduce it. You can go down to what, if you put your cursor over these options, I don't know if I've got it here. Yeah, there it is. It says righteousness as a state, as a noun. So if I select that, then no, I don't want to search this resource. Let me just get out of this. So if I go over here, righteousness, I go over to righteousness, go down here to this sense, and then we're going to search this resource through the Bible. This is a Bible sense lexicon Logos developed. And now what it does is it goes through all of the New Testament, and now this just gives you a list of all the passages in the New Testament which uses righteousness in the same sense that it's used in Romans 10:10. Okay, so that way you're not looking at all of the other nuances to the word righteousness. You're just looking at the ones that emphasize that moral quality. Yes, sir.
You mentioned your misgivings of Oneidas. I was wondering whether those show up in their analysis of these words. That is, have you ever found in the word studies that you've done this way any reflection of their presuppositions?
I have. That's why I said if you find something in any lexicon, low, night, or whatever, I really haven't there because John's helped me to use this a little more. I think it has some value, especially for finding synonyms to Greek words. And I think there's some other values to Loneida. It gives you some insight. But I always take everything I find in that lexicon with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean they're going to be wrong. It just means that I'm going to be aware that there may be some presuppositions that leak out in the way they analyze words. So if for example, if I look a word up in Kittle, and Kittle says something that I think is really spot on for a word, and I want to use it, I'm not going to use it just because the author, most of the guys who wrote in Kittle are what we classify as 19th century liberal Protestant theologians. Most of them don't even believe the Bible is the Word of God. It's just the Word of man. And in fact, Kittle was a big Nazi. It was originally written in German. He was a big Nazi, and he was very anti-Semitic. And when Jeff Bromley translated Kittle's 10-volume theological dictionary of the New Testament to English, he took all the anti-Semitic phrases that he found in there out, so they don't show up in your English Bible. But Kittle was not necessarily a good guy, but most of the articles that are in there are written by people like Bultmann and a number of others, and their theology leaks out. So if they say this word means X, I got to go look and see if I can document that through any other literature or through my own independent word study. Same thing with Loneida. Bruce.
Yeah, of course, what you're saying about Loneida and BDAG and Kittle and others, I was doing a quick mental review of all the lexicons that I know, and I can't think of one that I wouldn't be treating the same way.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is all these guys they just know more about words than you do, but they're not absolute. And when I was a student at Dallas, I'm sure this was true for Bruce when he went through seminary. Where'd you go to do?
Calvary
You went to Calvary. Is that we were taught that we're going to be, when we get through with our studies, we can do better work or as good a work as the guys who wrote these lexicons. And if you understand, you work and you study, even if you haven't gone through formal training at Dallas or whatever, you can learn, because I know guys who are very smart and learn self-taught in languages and can do good work. You can learn how to evaluate these things. And just because the lexicon says, it's the same thing. You look up a word in Webster's dictionary. Don't just go to Webster's. Go to Collins. Go to the OED. Go to 4 or 5 different English dictionaries, and you may find that one dictionary lists nuances that other English dictionaries don't list. And that's what these guys are doing is they're looking at the whole data set of how this particular word is used in English, and then they say, okay, what I see is 5 categories. Now the next guy comes along and says, I see 8 categories of meaning. And so you have to look at that and weigh it and what's their evidence. A lot of Bible study is just like a detective. That's one of my analogies is that Bible study is a lot like being a detective. You come on a crime scene and you've got all this evidence and you've got to figure out what the evidence says. What does it mean? And it's not going to give you a major premise, a minor premise, and a category. What you have to do often is figure out what explanation fits the data that's there. There's a certain term for that kind of logic which escapes me right now, but it's not a direct kind of logic. Okay, so that's just a way you can use the Loneida, and this is how you use this Bible sense lexicon. And so this is great because it gives what it does is instead of looking at at a whole range of every time the word dikaiosune is used with those 4 different semantic domains. Now you're just looking at all of the words in the New Testament where it's clearly talking about righteousness in that sense of a moral or ethical quality. And that now there's another way that you can help narrow down your searches, and this is something that that John showed us just recently. And this is you can do this through the creation of a document. If you go to your menu, you have 3 menu headings: Documents, Guides, and Tools. And under Documents, you have a number of different types of documents. These are listed on the left side. You have bibliography, clippings, notes, passage list, your prayer list, reading plan, sentence diagram, syntax search, visual filters, word find, puzzle, and word list. So you can create passage lists. And he's got a passage list here on Millennium Passages. Now, how would you create that? Well, you go here, let's say we're just going to call this, we're going to create a new passage list. So I click on that, opens up Untitled Passage List, and I'm going to just call this sort of a test passages on the kingdom. Okay? Let's change that to on the millennium. Now, let's say you're doing a study on something related to the I can't type. Can't spell either. Okay, so let's say you want to study some things like the Holy Spirit in relation to the millennial kingdom. Well, if you look up Spirit and do a word study on Spirit in the Old Testament, how many hits are you going to get? A lot. How many of them are going to be related to the kingdom? Not that many. Just a few. So you create a passage. How would you start doing this? Well, you can do something like this. You can open up a book. You click on your library, and you type in. Let's just do this. We'll type in author : Ryrie. So this is going to list all of Dr. Ryrie's books. So we'll open up Ryrie's Survey of Bible Doctrine. I'm not sure if that covers all this or not, but we'll go Survey of Bible Doctrine. We look at his. It may not. See, he's got.
9.
Yeah, chapter 9. What does the future hold? Okay, so we may start here and go through. He's got the rapture of the church. He's got the millennial kingdom right here. So here he's got this whole section. We're just going to highlight what he has to say about the millennial kingdom. Okay, and now we're going to do, if you have a PC, you'll do Control-C. If you have a Mac, you'll do Command-C, and you copy that. Or you could do a right mouse click and just copy that whole section. Now you come over here to your passage guide for millennial kingdom, and you click on Add, and you get a drop-down menu, and you can add from clipboard because we just copied that section to the clipboard. So I say copy, add from clipboard, and look at that. It just listed, it extracted all the verses from that section, and it put this into this document, and now I have a list of all the verses that Ryrie listed as part of the millennial kingdom. And then I can come back up here to sort, and if I click on sort, it sorts them into their biblical order. Now, I can go, for lack of time, I'm not going to do this, but I can go to Chafer Systematic Theology. I can go to Dwight Pentecost. I can go to any number of other books and do the same thing. All I have to do is find the section on the millennial kingdom, highlight it, do a copy, come over, and I can add it into this list by doing Add and Clipboard. And when I get done, I then go and click on Sort. And when you sort it, it gets rid of all the duplicates and puts all those verses in biblical order. Now, what's really neat about that is that next time I come along, and right after we did this with John a couple of weeks ago, I was teaching on something on the kingdom. I said, "Oh, that's great! I have a list of all these passages now on the millennial kingdom. It's going to be real easy for me to find the one that I wanted." And I didn't do a search. I just pulled up the list and kind of skimmed through it, and because I knew it was in Jeremiah, and bingo, there it was. So that was very fast. But if I wanted to, I've got this list now, and if I wanted to search it, I could close that out and go to my search window here, and I'm going to search all the text in. Does that document show up? Am I doing this right, John? It's the last category. I got so much stuff. Yeah, I'm getting close. I'm in the A's.
Can't you just type in passage list?
Can't
you just type in P in order to get to the P's?
I might. What a concept. See, I've just learned this recently, so I'm not all that.
Try PASS.
Yeah. Top resources. No, that took me.
Type in the name of it.
What did I call it?
Test passages.
Okay, that's right. You have a good memory, better than mine. Test
passages.
Oh, that's not showing up.
Did you save it?
Yeah, it automatically saves. See, if you go to Documents, it's right there. So anyway, the bottom line is you can search that for Spirit. It'll pull that passage list up, and you search that for Spirit, and then you can find it. So you're searching a restricted list, and instead of having to go through a whole bunch of passages in the Bible that use the word Spirit, you're now just searching for Spirit in specific group of passages that are on that particular topic. Okay, any questions? Now, and this is the kind of thing, what I've got is I've got a lady who's helping me, and she's going through Chafer Systematic Theology and Burkhoff, because that's all she's got on her system. But she's going through every single category and subcategory of those systematic theologies and creating these passage lists for the attributes of God, for the Trinity, for the deity of Christ, the humanity of Christ, all of these, and we're creating all of these passage lists that we're then uploading to the pastor study group. Okay, John.
I think the problem is you don't have Bible selected. You have basic.
Oh.
Select Bible. And then it should show in your drop-down menu.
Search all passages in.
Yeah. Click that little arrow to drop down, and it should be toward the bottom.
Oh, here we go. There we go. That's right. And so if I just type in Spirit and hit return, Isaiah 61:3. So if I'd hit Spirit and search the whole Scripture, now I think there's a couple other passages, but if we keep adding to it, we're going to build that out to a very large passage list that would be pretty much inclusive of everything in there. So I hope you can see the value of that. But what happens is we share it, and then the next time, let's say I add to it, and we've got 500 verses, and then John works on it a little more, and he adds something from another work. It might add 20 more. After you get to a certain point, you may think you're adding 400 verses, but you've already got 350 of them in there, so it only takes 50 new ones, but it keeps adding and making that list larger. So that's really helpful. So we'll send out I'll put out a piece of paper so you can sign up if you want to be a part of that study group. Okay, that's about 45 minutes that I want to cover on Logos. I'll come back in about 15 to 20 minutes, and I'll start with our introductory announcements, One announcement that's always important, I don't know where you park, but we try to support private enterprise here, and Pookie's Restaurant, which is just to my south. We always have a problem because we have limited space, and people say, they come over here and complain and say, your people are parking in our spot. What happens if we park somewhere else, which is fine, and then the person who usually parks in that spot goes and parks in front of Aunt Pookie's, and we get the blame. So anyway, just try not to park anywhere at that end of the building so that we're not the ones who are guilty of getting in Aunt Pookie's spot. So if you did park down that way before we get started in about 10 or 15 minutes, you can go move your car. All right. Thank you.